Well, welcome to Service Transform's investor presentation for the open offer. My name's Kevin Johnson, and I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes or so taking you through a little bit of background on the company, what we're up to, what we're doing, what's happening in terms of COVID-19, and hopefully give you a summary of the business and let you making decisions on whether you want to participate in the open offer going forward. Right, let's make a start, and I just want to spend a little bit of time on the background to the company in terms of what the market drivers are. And those drivers are quite compelling for the conversion of cars from the incumbent iron disc brakes over to carbon ceramic disc brakes. First one I'd like to talk about is technology. Now, when you swap out an iron rotor for a ceramic rotor, you get significant benefits. First of all, iron rotors over the last 20, 30 years have started to reach their limits of capability. Cars have got heavier, cars got faster, and that means that you start to experience brake fade if you push the brakes too hard. This doesn't happen with ceramics, and therefore there's a huge advantage to swapping over. Not only that, they're extremely lightweight in terms of their density versus an iron rotor. And that weight difference equates to about 25 kilos on a car when you swap all four corners. Now, if you're smart and you design that weight saving into the whole chassis of the car, we talk about making a saving on a car up to 100 kilos. That's about 5% of the car's weight, and it makes a massive difference to the things in the car in terms of design and handling, refinement, and so forth. I'll move on and then talk a little bit about the drivers for the environment. Obviously, getting that massive weight saving, we then talk about improvements in efficiency in the car's fuel efficiency and fuel consumption. And being 5% weight saving, it equates right through to the weight saving, giving you a fuel saving in terms of the car's range. Not only that, if you're using it and doing this a lot, you'll see that there's a reduction in brake wear on the road, and pad dust, which is a pollutant and is well known for causing certain pollution in the environment on the streets, can be reduced significantly. If we then look at lifetime and total cost of ownership, the first thing to note is the service intervals between servicing components on cars has steadily increased over the last 20 to 30 years. It used to be less than 10,000 miles before you'd have to take it in for a service. Now it's typically 18, 20,000 miles. Now, with iron rotors, that would still be part of a service wear item. Moving over to ceramics, they really don't wear out during general road use. So you eliminate the need for it to be a service item and therefore reducing that cost of ownership. We talk about the total cost of ownership in terms of every time you have to take your car in for a service and replace wear parts, there's a cost of not only the parts, but the labor to do so. Without having to do that anymore on the car, you see a significant reduction in your cost of ownership going forward. If we then talk about quality, here we talk about the quality of the components in terms of when they're fitted to the car. The weight saving gives a tremendous benefit to the handling of the car, so you reduce the gyroscopic effects when you're going around corners, and the comfort and refinements of the work the car has to do when it's going over bumpy roads in terms of shock absorbers and the chassis is dramatically reduced and gives you that air of quality when you've got these on the car. Then, of course, you talk about the look of the car and the aesthetics of the car. These brakes are very shiny, they look great, they fill the wheel, they have a very desirable aspect to them. Not only that, the caliper that goes with them, it's typically a very bright yellow, red, or orange color, or green, lime green. They don't corrode, so when you're in the wet and your iron disc starts to rust and look unsightly, these will look as new as the day they were bought. And as I talked about earlier about reducing the brake dust and the pollution, it has a knock-on effect that unsightly, dirty alloy wheels are a thing of the past because you have cleaner wheels. Then if you talk about what's happening in the marketplace and the drivers, and we talk about competition, currently there's only effectively one standard carbon ceramic brake supplier in the world, and that's a company called Brembo SGL. They act like a monopolistic supplier. They're about £160 million per year in terms of their revenue. And really the market as a driver is looking for more and more competition because competition grows markets, grows capacity. So when you add all these things together, all of these 6 components, those are really quite compelling. And it's why all of these guys on the slide here have moved over and started adopting carbon ceramic brakes on more and more models of car. Some at the top end of the luxury and automotive market have really gone to standard carbon ceramics and have completely moved away from iron rotors. Now, if I talk about the customer values, and when I talk about customer values, they really translate through to what shareholder value is, because if we can make our customers happy, our shareholders will then see a value in return for that too. I want to talk here about firstly the product. Now, not every carbon ceramic disc is the same. We use different technology to make our carbon ceramic disc. And when you look at the way the two perform versus a Brembo and ours, we talk about ours having a superior technology. In particular, it allows the brake to run significantly cooler through heat management, and that's typically 150 degrees cooler. And also it has a longer life, and life is directly correlated to strength of the part. So the stronger it is, the longer the life. And typically ours is about 50% stronger. So it has a huge benefit in terms of lifetime and in terms of its operating temperatures on the car. If we then look at price, when we look at the comparison between ourselves and the Brembo product, we think our price is competitive and it allows us to maintain good margins for the business going forward. A key requirement from our customers is knowing that there's capacity. And we spent quite an investment now and quite a bit of time building our capacity. We have capacity of about £16.5 million worth per year now. And the site is expandable up to our, if you like, addressable market and our pipeline, £50 million per year. I come back to quality. It's a key requirement for our customers as well as the market. And we are certified to the industry standards, which is IATF 16949. And we are also standardized to our own management systems from the environmental standpoint with 14001 and ISO 9001. And geography is an important point for our customers. Our key markets are the UK, Germany, and the US. And for that reason, we have offices in the UK, and that allows us to service both the UK and the US quite easily. And we also maintain offices in Germany to support particularly our German customers. And then finally, on customer values, it's about supply chain. Now, we believe that we're the only credible alternative to Brembo in the marketplace today. And to be really useful to our customers, that supply chain that we provide has to be fully independent from anybody else. And to do that, we've created a supply chain which is independent, but not only that, it's highly integrated. So we've done a lot of vertical integration, and most of the processing to deliver a carbon ceramic brake is delivered in-house at ST. And when you put all that together in terms of customer values, and as I say, that translates to shareholder value, we can start to talk about the success of the company and how we're rapidly growing. Our last financial year, 2019, which was a truncated year of 7 months, generated revenues of £1.5 million. We signed contracts that allow us to talk about now reaching cash generation in 21 and then profitability in 22. And that brings our revenues up to circa 6 million. And we have a prospective contract pipeline now, which as you look out towards 2025 is worth 50 million per year. And this of course is in the context that there's a potential addressable market of 2 billion when you look at the luxury and performance car market swapping over from ceramics from iron. Okay, now I'd like to talk to you about our revenue roadmap in a bit more detail. And by what I mean by that, we've had a very successful year where we've been able to sign new contracts and we've got existing business. And I'm going to talk you through how we go through cash generation and into profitability over the next 2 to 3 years. Let's start with 2020. And in 2020, we have our near OEM and retrofit business, which is recurring revenue of about £2 million per year. We don't talk about near OEMs and retrofit very much. It's not a very big market, so it doesn't really feature as a strategic objective, but it's very useful in terms of cash generation. And in our early years, it was very useful in terms of developing the product. Now, a near OEM to us is a company that makes typically 50 cars a year, or they take an existing car and convert it into a special version at that kind of volume. And we have a stable of these, up to 10, and we service those with products throughout the year to their build rates. We also have the retrofit market. Now, a retrofit business to us is where somebody has an existing car and wants to put the best brakes in the world on, which are ours, and then they would buy our brakes, upgrade their car, and then be able to experience the full benefits of having the world's best carbon ceramic brake in their car. Now that, as I say, is worth about 2 million. And then move on to the other contracts we have that kick in 2020. We have the Aston Martin Valkyrie. We've had that contract. We've done all the development in previous years. That's really due to go into series production in the second half of 2020. And when it does, it's worth £1 million per year. So we'll see the benefit of that in this year as well in terms of revenue. And then in addition to that, we've signed contracts with OEM 5, Koenigsegg, and OEM 6. And if you add all those together, including the retrofit and the Valkyrie revenues, I think our guidance out there in the market is that we would have revenues just over 3 million, about 3.2. And it's important to note that once the Valkyrie kicks in terms of the series production and the series revenue, that really does lead us into cash break even. Now, if I move into 2021 and talk you through the revenues there, again, we have the recurring revenues of the retrofit market worth 2 million, and we'll have a full year of the Aston Martin series production worth 1 million. And then I'd like to add to that then that we've moved from development to series production for OEM 5. And so if you add those together, and we won't get a full year of OEM 5, but if you add up the first two plus a quarter of the OEM 5 plus development for Koenigsegg and OEM 6, our guidance for everybody is that our revenues would be about 4.2 million. And it's in this year we can then start talking about leading ourselves through to cash generation for a full year. And it's the conversion of that OEM 5 contract through development into series production that takes us into that. And then take you into 2022. Again, we have our 2 million revenue for the retrofit. We see the latter part of our series production revenue from the Valkyrie. We have a full year of our OEM 5 contract. And there we can add the Koenigsegg revenue for the new model and OEM 6, their new model, where they both go into series. And when you add up the revenues for 2022, I think our guidance takes us up to just shy of 6 million. And that's where we then move through from cash generation into profitability. And it's particularly because we're adding those two contracts we've already got and moving them into series production. Now, if I talk about these contracts and another feature of these contracts, I always want to make a point that these are recurring revenues as they're multi-year contracts. And I've put on the slide there that you can see that the revenues go out some years. In particular, OEM 5 goes out to 2029, Koenigsegg goes out to 2026, and OEM 6 goes out to 2025. So you can see that these revenues, once they're secure and they move from development into series, really do give us a strong foundation for profitability. And then looking forward from there, we can talk about this prospective contract pipeline of 50 million by 2025. And really then we can build that up because we have trading relationships now with OEM 1, OEM 5, OEM 6, and Koenigsegg. And if you add their demand together, plus other new OEMs that we're working on, we don't talk about them very often until we've got contracts to communicate to everybody. That really does give us, if you like, the platform to build those contracts up over multiple years. And that's where we'll see our revenues grow rapidly up to the prospect of reaching 50 million per year. Now I'd like to move on and talk a little bit about what's happening in the current environment with COVID-19 and the potential risk of a business interruption. It's worth stating, first of all, that we've been operating through the COVID crisis now for about 6 weeks. And our operational status is that we are still fully operational. We follow all the government guidelines. We've separated into different teams to reduce the risks of spread. We have remote working, and I've been remote working for a number of weeks now. And we have effectively multiple teams that have all the capabilities we need that can work in the business on site to do the manufacturing and engineering. And if we see that we have resources drop out, we've got people that are, if you like, available to substitute in and maintain the full operations of the business. And that has really worked very, very well over the last few weeks. And we expect it to continue as well until we're through the full crisis. But if you then look at, what I'd like to do is look at the demand side risks and the supply side risks of the business. And if I start with the demand side first, really we have seen a slowdown start to happen, particularly in the retrofit market, first of all, and a little bit in our other markets as well. And we'll expect that slowdown to continue for the next 3 months through into June. Now, we are also expecting that will be a recovery. And that recovery might be gradual, and we'll start to see that occurring through the second half of 2020. When we've looked at our, if you like, our revenues and the revenues risks, we've split that out into the key customer bases and tried to understand whether there's an impact, a significant impact to our revenues for 2020, and whether that's probable or not. And I think you can see from the slide on the demand side that really it's all down to the Valkyrie and whether that happens in the second half of the year. It's a significant part of our revenue, as I've already pointed out, worth £1 million. And if that would be delayed, and it will only be a delay, it's worth saying that, because all of these cars are pre-sold. Aston Martin themselves are referencing that they expect it to go ahead in the second half of this year, and it is important to their revenues as it is to us. But if there is a delay, that's where our risk comes from in terms of revenue. There are also some risks in terms of the near OEMs, in terms of the impact of some of the near OEM news being delayed, or for that matter, whether all of our near OEM customers can survive the business interruption. And then in terms of the retrofit market, again, slightly less risk, but nonetheless some revenue risk there for us on the demand side, because people buy our kits to go and do fun days and track days on the roads. If they are in lockdown, it becomes increasingly more difficult to go and enjoy your car. Now, there is differences across the world in terms of geography. I know here in the UK we're in lockdown and people perhaps aren't going out driving unless it's essential. But I also know in Asia, in certain markets over in Asia, they have now reopened and they are starting to enjoy their track days and enthusiastic driving again. So it depends on where we are in the world, but we do see some risk to demand. And the last point really is, as I say, we see a recovery, or we're expecting a recovery in the second half of the year. And that means we don't see a risk to our revenues for 2021, and we see it as a minimal impact. Okay, if I move on to the supply side now, and here the emphasis is slightly different. Here we're looking at our capabilities and our supply chain's capabilities. And although I talk about currently we're fully operational, we are expecting to see the effects of the COVID business interruption through the next few months, starting in April, with both ourselves, maybe as we lose people and lose resource, and that we hope will come back, but also with our supply chain as well. But we do also expect, rather than a gradual, a rapid recovery in capability from our supply chain, and therefore we'd expect to be in good shape to be able to support from supply side in the second half of this year. So when we look at the risks to our revenue there from a business interruption, they're slightly different. Because Valkyrie is only really in the second half of the year, we don't see a significant risk in terms of supply side for Valkyrie. It's really then down to retrofit, which is what we would see over the next few months, where we're at the highest risk, and for some of our near OEMs. Now, if I talk about financial planning for a COVID business interruption, and I just want to take you through some of our scenario planning here and what we think are the potential risks and how we mitigate those. If I start with some of the assumptions, first of all, we've gone through the whole of our revenues. As I said earlier, our revenue guidance has us at about 3.2 million for the year. When we've gone through it line by line with each of our customers and really just asked ourselves where we think each customer is, we've worked through all of those and we see a risk to our revenues about 50%. And I've got on the slide there how that breaks down. It's about a third from the OEMs, the near OEMs, and the retrofit. Now that equates to about 1.6 million in terms of revenue risk. And obviously we have good margins on that revenue, about 70–80%. So that puts a cash risk to the business, which we really ought to address. Now, other inputs that go into the scenario are also worth highlighting. One is we have a very healthy order book for the year so far and sales. Our FY20 sales and order book is just over 1 million. So in terms of putting that in perspective, in terms of our revenue expectation, as you know, if you exclude the Aston Martin revenue, we've got about 2 million in revenue from our near OEM and retrofit customers. We already have 50% of that in order cover. We haven't seen anyone asked to delay or cancel an order. So really our job is to continue fulfilling that order book. We still see a risk of 600,000 in terms of new orders to come in, but that really does cover Aston Martin and our near OEMs and the retrofit going forward. So we feel like we're being pessimistic, but better being planning for the worst and hoping for the best is what we've been trying to do here. Now, in terms of cash into the business, which is what this is really all about, determining what we need, we've got an R&D tax credit that we're expecting in the year for 300,000. We're in good shape, ironically, for our stock. So we don't see a risk to the business in terms of supply from stock. We'll actually utilize the stock and realize a couple of 100,000 out of the inventory reduction. And then when we've gone and looked at the business in detail, we are taking some management action to reduce costs, and we are looking to take some of the government support in terms of furloughing some of the staff. And we think that's worth about 600,000 to us this year. Now, as I said, the key thing here for the scenario planning is that we are expecting a recovery in the second half of 2020. But if I was to then go into what would be the worst case, if you like, for planning, it would be no recovery for at least 6 months, maybe for the rest of 2020. And what would that mean for us? Well, in simple terms, it would mean we'd need another cash planning exercise for another $500,000. What that would mean for the business, we'd be expecting no new OEM orders, no new near OEM, no new retrofit orders. We'd move the shift further down to one shift and do further cost savings, but we would try and maintain the development and engineering that we're doing for the existing contracts we've got with OEM 5, Koenigsegg and OEM 6, because it's important we are in good shape for those in the subsequent year in 2021 when they go into series. So what does that all mean in terms of what we require in terms of a fundraise, which we've just completed? Well, let me take you through that in terms of the investment. Well, if you take all of that into account, first of all, we call it our COVID-19 resilience. And really, we've identified that we need about 1.3 in terms of our COVID resilience if there is a business interruption risk. And I say if, we don't know what's going to happen, but this is about planning for the worst. We then take away from that our management actions and the government support, which is worth about 600,000. And then we have assumed the worst case, which is an additional $500,000 in terms of what could be truly the worst case. And that would mean we need about 1.2 to secure and mitigate the COVID-19 business interruption risks. Well, we did a placing and raised 1.4. And then to follow on from that, which is why we're doing this presentation for everybody, it's really about now saying it should be fair and everybody should have the opportunity as shareholders in the company to be able to partake and participate in the open offer. So we've created the open offer of another 300,000 to allow existing shareholders to benefit from the share price we did the fundraising at. Right, so hopefully I've given you a bit more information about where we are as a business. We think we were doing very, very well until the COVID-19 crisis hit. We were extremely excited about where we were. We think it's a fabulous company and the investment proposition is a really strong one. We're well positioned in our marketplace to take advantage of not just our existing contracts, but also the contract pipeline worth 50 million a year. And that's all in the context of the £2 billion potential market. And really that's being driven by our existing business relationship with our OEMs, OEM 1, 3, 5 and 6, and some new OEMs that we don't tend to talk about but are there in the background. I've talked you through our revenue roadmap, which is secured against contracts and really takes us through cash break even in 2020 when the Valkyrie kicks in, and then into cash generation in 21 and profitability in 22. And then we've looked at the COVID-19 business interruption risks, and we talked about how we were still able to operate fully during the current crisis, but there are risks to business interruption, mainly on the demand side, and that's principally with our entering series production for Aston Martin, and on the supply side, a little bit on the retrofit and the near OEMs. Now, to mitigate that risk, we've completed that placing and fundraising of 1.4 million, and we were pleased to do so, and we thank all of our institutional shareholders for supporting us, and that really does give us the resilience against anything that we'd come up against in the next few months. We've implemented some management actions, and we are taking advantage of some of the government support during this tough time, but we did want to make, if you like, a point to say that we value all of our shareholders, and we've made sure that we've got an open offer here for everyone. Everyone who wants to participate can participate in that open offer. So that just leaves me to thank you for listening, and no doubt we'll talk to each other soon.